What happens when a rising star suddenly disappears? Without explanation? Without defense? Without noise? In an industry built on constant visibility, silence can be the loudest shock of all. Tonight, LVT-SHOWBIZ explores the quiet collapse of Shukai and the unexpected strength of the woman who chose to stay when everything else fell away. The fall did not arrive with scandal, sirens, or public confrontation. It arrived quietly. One day, Shukai was everywhere. On set, on screens, in schedules planned months ahead. The next, he was simply absent. What unsettled audiences most was not the news itself, but the lack of narrative. No dramatic explanation followed. No carefully worded statement attempted to control the damage. The industry, usually fluent in spin, seemed to pause. And in that pause, people felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. This was not a fall designed for spectacle. It was the kind that happens when momentum outpaces endurance, when success continues to demand proof long after the body has exhausted its supply. The sudden disappearance forced a reframing. Without promotional images or curated updates, the audience was left with a stark truth. Behind productivity lies fragility. The story stopped being about performance and became about limits. In an industry that thrives on constant motion, stillness can feel alarming. Yet it was precisely this stillness that exposed how little room there is for rest once expectations take hold. The fall was unseen, not because it was sudden, but because no one had been looking for signs of slowing down. Ambition is often praised for its silence. The ability to endure without complaint is treated as professionalism, even virtue. Yet the body does not share this loyalty. It records every night of shortened sleep, every meal postponed, every emotion carefully suppressed for the sake of continuity. When exhaustion finally manifests, it does so without diplomacy. It interrupts plans. It disrupts narratives. It forces attention. In this story, the body became the first honest witness. Medical language replaced promotional language. Rest replaced rehearsal. And for the first time in a long while, ambition was no longer leading the conversation. What makes this moment resonate is its familiarity. Many viewers recognize the warning signs they once ignored in themselves. The insistence on pushing through, the belief that collapse can be scheduled later. The content does not accuse, it mirrors. Burnout is rarely a single event. It is cumulative. 1,000 small decisions to prioritize output over recovery. When the body finally insists on being heard, it reframes success as something fragile rather than guaranteed. Here, the body did not betray ambition. It protected the person behind it. And that distinction changes how the entire story is understood. In moments of crisis, absence is expected, distance is understandable. Silence is often interpreted as self-preservation. That is why the choice made by Tan Songyun felt so quietly disruptive. There was no announcement of devotion, no attempt to define the relationship for public comfort. Instead, there was a series of private decisions that never sought validation. Plans were adjusted, commitments were quietly reshaped. Presence replaced explanation. What gives this choice weight is not its romance, but its risk. Staying offered no immediate benefit. It came without certainty of recovery, without clarity of future, and without applause. In an environment where alignment with success is often strategic, remaining close to vulnerability is a conscious departure. Her silence was not emptiness. It was intention. It protected dignity rather than narrative. It placed care above commentary. For audiences accustomed to declarations and denials, this restraint felt unusually sincere. It suggested that some bonds are not meant to be consumed. They are meant to function. The choice to stay, unannounced and unperformed, reframed loyalty as something lived daily rather than declared once. Loyalty is often misunderstood as a single defining moment. In reality, it is repetition. It is choosing consistency when convenience would suggest withdrawal. In this story, loyalty does not appear as sacrifice dramatized for effect. It appears as routine, as waiting, as adapting to uncertainty without demanding reassurance. It exists in the unremarkable details that rarely reach headlines. What makes this form of loyalty compelling is its ordinariness. It does not attempt to redeem, defend, or rescue. It simply refuses to leave. This kind of devotion challenges the logic of transactional relationships, especially within competitive industries. It does not ask, "What does this cost me?" but rather, "What does this require of me today?" Audiences respond because this loyalty feels achievable. It is not mythic or performative. It is grounded, and in its groundedness, it becomes aspirational. By framing loyalty as a daily choice rather than a grand gesture, the narrative restores value to patience, care, and emotional labor, qualities often dismissed as secondary yet essential to survival when systems fail. As the personal narrative unfolded, a broader discomfort emerged. The story invited questions that could not be contained within individual responsibility. Why are periods of rest treated as liabilities? Why does silence provoke suspicion rather than concern? And how many careers quietly shift course without explanation, not because of failure, but because of power? The content does not accuse specific forces. Instead, it illuminates patterns. It shows how absence can be misread, how silence can be filled by speculation, and how narratives can be shaped without participation from those most affected. This ambiguity is precisely what unsettles viewers. The lack of clear villains forces reflection. It suggests that systems rarely announce their harm. They normalize it. By placing a human story within an institutional context, the narrative widens its scope. It becomes less about one actor's experience and more about the conditions that make such experiences common. The unease lingers because the questions remain unanswered. And perhaps that is the point. Some structures are sustained precisely because they resist scrutiny. If Shukai rises again, it will not be because the world demanded it, but because healing allowed it. And if Tan Songyun's quiet stand has taught us anything, it is this. Sometimes the bravest love is the one that refuses to perform. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please consider subscribing to LVT Showbiz. Your support helps us continue sharing thoughtful, human-centered stories from the world of entertainment. Thank you for watching, for reflecting, and for being part of this community. Until next time, take care and stay with us on LVT Showbiz.